Happy New Year, everyone, and welcome back to the First Fight series. On today's episode, we sit down with UFC bantamweight Sijara Eubanks. She tells about how her initial goal to lose weight and watching YouTube knockout videos got her on her journey in martial arts. We also discuss the significance of age in MMA and the resurgence of the antihero in the sport. Welcome to the show today, Sarge.
Awesome. Thank you for having me. I'm super excited. I've known Jenny here for a while. I actually met her husband, Corey Anderson, during my stint on The Ultimate Fighter. And him and Mark and all the other guys in New Jersey, I followed them back here because I was lonely and I wanted to see what Jersey was like. So yeah, I'm really, really happy to be on the show today.
Yeah, fellow transplant to Jersey. We're all here now. So, Sarge, you can just get started, get into the story. What brought you to competing in martial arts and MMA specifically?
Actually, what got me competing in martial arts, I was actually I was 22 years old. I had dropped out of college and super lost in life, and was working a desk job that I hated really bad. And I got real big. I had hit 205 pounds. I got really chunky. And so I was like, all right, let me try something fun to do after work to try to help lose some weight. And I tried a bunch of things. And simultaneously, I had got lost in the YouTube rabbit hole of most nasty knockouts, which so I was watching ultimate knockouts. I started watching Tank Abbott and some of these guys in Japan and Dream knocking each other out on YouTube, which sort of led me to the UFC, which I had never heard of. And so which led me to this thing called MMA. So I was like, all right, that was cool. So as I was looking for things to lose weight, I stumbled across this MMA school. And I was living in Maryland at the time. So I just kind of started doing that. And the first day in, we were doing some moving around and some grappling. And I started grappling and trying to do the stuff I saw in these fights. And the guy was like, where'd you learn Jiu Jitsu from? And I was like, what's that? And he was like, Jiu Jitsu. So that's kind of the first knowledge of the sport I started to get into. And so a couple of guys in DC had this club, and we would go upstairs to this boxing gym and we would throw these old mats down and we'd just roll around and try to do stuff that we saw on TV. So that was my first introduction to martial arts as an adult. And very shortly thereafter, I did my first tournament in Jiu Jitsu. Super cool. I remember I weighed in at 198 pounds, and the girl I fought was probably 120 or something. This poor girl. And I just went out there, I tackled her. I didn't even try to double leg or anything. I legit just ran at her, and she fell over, and somehow I tapped her off, just some grabbing her. She probably was terrified. Then I went and proceeded to throw up in the bathroom from adrenaline. And that was it. I was hooked. And so I started training jiu-jitsu full time, and that was back in 2008. So I just threw myself into jiu-jitsu, started competing in all the local tournaments in the Maryland area, trying to do nagas and stuff. I found my way onto Team Lord Irvin after bouncing around a little while trying to find a legit gym. So I was the first legit jiu-jitsu MMA gym that I started at. So I just did jiu-jitsu for 8 years, basically. Just climbed the ranks really fast, went to blue belt, purple belt, won tournaments, started traveling the world doing jiu-jitsu, and I was like, man, this is pretty cool. I've been quit my job. I just quit my job a while ago. Screw it, I'm having fun. I'm being a hippie and doing martial arts and hanging out all day. And so my jiu-jitsu journey was actually really, really fun, really amazing part of my journey. But really quickly into it, I knew I wanted to do MMA. So my first fight probably would have been 2010. I did a WKA in Virginia, and I had signed up for MMA and Muay Thai. And then when I got there, the only people that were near my weight class were the MMA girls. So I did my first MMA fight, and I remember being in the middle of the round. I didn't know the rules. I didn't know if I could hit her on the ground or not. And I was a blue belt at that time, so I was just grabbing her and taking her to the ground. I ended up finishing her with the rear naked choke, I think second or third round or something like that. And of course, I don't have the video anymore, but I remember like jumping up and down and like shaking my dreads and like screaming to the top of my lungs. And like now that I'm like so like seasoned, I was like, man, what a little jerk I was, like running around this WKA like, yeah. But at that time, it was like the coolest thing I'd ever done in my whole life. I was like, oh my God, like I want to fight. I thought it was amazing. So that just bit the bug. I kept training, kept doing boxing, wrestling, putting everything together. I didn't fight again for a while after that. I kind of like really immersed myself into my grappling because I knew going into MMA I would have to have like a base, a solid fallback, and so grappling was like my first love, the first thing that kind of hooked me into MMA anyway. So I just focused on that. After I got my black belt, after I got my brown belt, I can't remember what year it was that I fight again. I fought back to back in 2000 and must have been 2014. Yeah, I fought 2 amateur fights. Won those both by submission. I think I got my black belt shortly thereafter and went to go pro in 2015. I made my pro debut in Invicta LLC. I have to remember the year because I made my debut and I turned 30 the next day. So I made my pro debut in Invicta, and the very next day I turned 30, and I thought that was pretty cool. Little birthday gift to myself. I finished my first fight with ground and pound. So it was like obviously long 10-year kind of journey, but it was 8-year kind of journey from the first day I stepped into the gym to making my pro debut. But it was absolutely incredible, just learning the different arts and just growing from like this little fat kid to weighing in at 135 pounds, like traveling the world. I just knew like really early on, like when I dropped out of school, I just knew I wanted to travel, and I knew I wanted to be happy, and I knew I wanted to make money. And so those are like the kind of boxes I wanted to check. So when I found like martial arts, I was like, okay, I'm not gonna make any money, but I'll get to travel and I'll get to be real happy, so I'll take that. And the cool part is now I can actually make money. I can provide my family for something that when I started, I mean, girls were fighting in Bulldog, like girls were fighting in like random fights in like Costa Rica, like you had to go to like Japan. So I got into the game thinking this is what I love and this is what I'm gonna do. And as the sport grew, it turned into something I could actually make a living off of, and so it's been really incredible.
It's amazing. I mean, so your first fight, the fact that you weren't really preparing for an MMA fight, did that ease some of your nerves going into it?
No, when I first started, I really, like, to be honest, I was a jerk, and I just had no idea that there could be nerves. I just knew like I'm a killer and I'm gonna kill everybody. Like I had no concept of like this girl hurting me at all. Which I probably didn't figure out for a long time in my career.
Well, it's good too. I think sometimes Corey was like started like that, where he just was so raw, and then as he got more knowledgeable, you get way more conservative, because then you're like, oh my God, I can get hurt doing this. You know so much more. I feel like when I first fought, I knew too much, and I already was at that point where I was like, okay, I got to be conservative and safe, and I feel like if you don't know, I mean, there's a little window, I think that's best, but if you don't know a lot of it, I feel like it's easier to just go out and be raw and do what you do, because when it comes down to it, it's like you're trying to hurt someone, but when you think about all the technique and everything you need, it sometimes gets in the way, and you think about, well, which way could I throw this punch, or what combination's best, and it distracts.
I absolutely feel like that. I feel like it's almost like when you're amateur, when I first started, you feel like a little kid. Like when you teach little kids like Jiu Jitsu, and you're like, let's do a flying armbar, they're like, great. Like, no, like as an adult, I'm not jumping into the air and hoping that someone catches me and land on my head. So I do agree, like early on, I just kind of was like, yeah, like there was no fear. But as you start to grow, and then you do, like when you're around the game enough and you see the way people get hurt, it does kind of be like, it kind of puts a little hesitation into it. And then on top of that, I think I just kind of matured through experience. Like I lost a couple of fights. Like the first time I lost, I was like, me? Like lost a fight? Like I was like, my world came tumbling down, and it was like because I had been such a big fish, I think, in a small pond. I had never been exposed. And so when I did lose and when I did face adversity, it was like, oh, like, this is part of the game. Like, okay. Like, when you look at especially some of the women or some of the other champions who you see that are champs now, you look at their record, they face adversity. They have losses. You see little chips on people's records. So, my record as it stands right now isn't my favorite, but I feel like I did learn maturity in some of those early losses. Like, oh, okay, it's not the end of the world.
There's so much emphasis on that perfect record, I feel like, especially in boxing. But in MMA, too, I feel like there's a little window where you get to be picked up in the UFC. And you look at Thai fighters that fight, like, hundreds of fights. You look at how many losses they have. Like, it takes so much time to develop as a fighter, I think, and not everyone develops right away. Unfortunately, in this game, in MMA, we really can't fight as frequently. It's not healthy to fight that frequently, and you really kind of looked at like this, like, 10 fight window usually is when they get picked up, a little less than that, and then go from there. But I feel like you see a lot of fighters have this, like, resurgence, like RDA and all these fighters who were at one point, you know, on a losing streak and make a comeback. I feel like there's more room for that now, I guess, than there used to be. People are more forgiving.
I agree, and I think people are more forgiving, and I think the sport's evolution plays. I think it's a little bit of a mix of both. I think MMA is in a really interesting point in its growth as an overall sport. So you see, like, you see guys like RDA making a comeback, Donald Cerrone making a comeback after taking a bunch of losses.
That's a good example of, like, someone who's, like, fighting to fight and isn't, like, discouraged by those losses. I feel like Pettis is kind of going down that route.
Pettis is getting there. Pettis is getting to that point in his career. Like, all right, you're taking a couple L's. You don't have that same kind of heat that you had when you first came in. Like, where's your career go? Jeremy Stevens, I think, is another fighter that's had, like, a lot of ups and downs. And those are kind of guys that, oh my God, George Masvidal. Like, talk about a comeback with, that's one of the most insane comebacks.
The game, really. I mean, that whole BMF belt, I feel like it's, what's the word for it? It's like not the underdog, but it's like the Antihero kind of making a resurgence. They're not perfect. Yeah, the
non-perfect Antihero, the guy that's got, like, scars and dents on his gear and on his face, the guy that's been through shit, the guy that's been fighting a long time.
I still want to see him fight.
And I'm big on reading too, and I'm big on like the law of attraction and things like that. And when you read books like Think and Grow Rich and like Psycho-Cybernetics, like, people's maturity takes time and people's mastery of what they do takes time. A lot of time it takes 10, 12 years to master that kind of stuff. And you see guys that are 34, 35 years old, where a couple of years ago, like Randy Couture, people thought he was ancient when he was fighting at 30 something. Now you see guys fighting at 32, 35 all the time. And it's just, I mean, look, Frankie Edgar is still fighting and winning fights, like, and I think it's for me, at least personally, super reassuring, because like I'm still so, it gives me hope because I'm so young in my career still. Like, when I look, I see people go like you see guys like 10 fights in, usually you can start looking to get into the UFC. Like, I don't even have 10 fights total and like I'm top 15. Like, it's like, okay.
Well, I feel like it's super common with the women's divisions too, because I think there's a lot of women that have been like chipping away at it before they were really mainstream, so they came on the scene already having a lot of experience. Then there's a lot of women who don't have experience because there just aren't a lot of women in general. And I also think that, luckily for us, one thing in our favor is that women can compete with each other physically at an older age. I feel like men cannot as they get older, because we all peaked when we were like 16 physically. Men like peak when they're like 30. So once they get past that point, they can't keep up with the speed. You just see it. And the women, I feel like we mature more, like, mentally, I feel like, in an athletic standpoint as we're older. So I like that. Like, a lot of older women can compete with each other. Older in quotations. I don't think
in quotations. I'm not even quotations. Like, I'm about to be 35, so I'm cool with it. Yeah, people ask me all the time, like, like people in the street, like people don't know, like, oh, 35, like my career's just starting. But it's like, yeah, as a female, like, one, I spent most of my life, like, I don't have a lot of mileage either, personally. Like, a lot of guys wrestled all through high school, wrestled since they were 3 or 5 years old, you know. So by the time I hit 35, look how many years you've been putting your body through stuff. I think women also, where we are in the sport, we don't have that kind of mileage on our bodies either. A lot of women are coming over from like soccer. A lot of women are like myself, coming from like not really any other sport other than some form of martial arts, coming in from boxing or Muay Thai. But a lot of women don't have like that kind of, yeah, I've been doing like wrestling since I was 4, I've been doing karate since I was like 3, 4. You don't have as many women like that. So as the sport grows, you do see a lot of the top women in the game over 30. There's a lot of women just top 15 that are just over 30. I think it's great. So I mean, at 35, I feel like I'm all wise now, you know.
Totally. I always let it hold me back that I was older. I think in my head, I just thought, I'm not like a fast learner or I didn't pick up quick. So I thought, well, it's going to take me a while. And then I'm like, well, I'm not going to have enough time. But looking back at it, things happen so quick, I feel like. In the MMA industry especially, things can take forever, and then all of a sudden, especially for a woman, I feel like you could be in the UFC and top 15 within a year, you know, depending on your performances. But I let it totally hold me back mentally. But the reality is, like, most women, I feel like, that compete these days are still in their early 30s. It's going to change. We're right at the cusp, I feel like, where we can get away with it. Now there's going to be this whole new era of like Macy Barbers who have been coming up training martial arts, and then we might not be able to do that anymore.
No, I agree. You're definitely seeing, which is for me like kind of bittersweet, because is so amazing, because now, yeah, you're gonna see younger girls. You're gonna see girls like Paige Van Zandt, Macy Barber. You're gonna see girls who are young and in the game, and you're gonna see the skill set sort of catch up, and you see that new wave of like young dogs coming up. So I think it's super cool for the women, and yeah, I tell guys all the time, like guys who come up and talk to me like, oh, how quick, you know, before I can make it into the UFC or whatever. And I'm like, you know, for guys and girls, it's just two different answers right now. Like for me, like 1 second I was working like security, like taking care of my kid. I got onto the Ultimate Fighter, like less than like 6 months later, I'm fighting for a title shot. Like, whoa, wait, like just a couple of months ago, I wasn't even in the UFC. Now I'm like, you know, about to, you know, could have fought for a title. So it's the turnaround for the speed up the ladder is shorter for women right now, because the talent pool is a little shallower, but it's growing, and I think it's good for the sport. And you see how quick it grows. You see girls like Ronda Rousey, like 1 minute she's killing everybody, and the rest of the pack caught up to her like that. She wasn't even able to compete, and I think you're gonna see more of that with women. You're gonna see that gap sort of close a lot quicker, I think, as this new generation of girls comes up.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I'm looking forward to it. It just shows that the sport's progressing, and I'm looking forward to seeing you continue along your journey in fighting in this kind of new era. I feel like you have a different vibe about you now that you've changed divisions, and I'm excited. I'm looking forward to it. I know you had to step back, but like we were just talking about, we have that new mindset that Masvidal, those people kind of like are setting the stage now where you can still like do well in your career and make a comeback and get that title shot again.
Absolutely. I think Masvidal is definitely like one of my new favorite heroes right now, and I think it just goes to show like it's never too late to turn that corner for people, and I kind of had just believed in that in general. I do a lot of like self-reflection and all kinds of stuff like that, and coming back off of my last loss in Mexico, I came home like, yeah, like let's get back out to the garage, let's start this engine back up, and let's get this girl back on the road here. So yeah, I'm super pumped. I can't wait to see what else unfolds in this division.
Well, stick with the heel role. I like it. I like hearing people boo for you and you walk out to Cardi B. Like, I haven't seen a walkout that gave me chills like that in a while. So keep it up. I'm looking forward to watching it.
It's gonna be Megan Thee Stallion, I think. Do you know Megan Thee Stallion? Yeah. Okay, Megan's even more raw than Cardi, I think. I love Cardi now. You know, Cardi, if you're listening, you're still my first love. Don't but Megan Thee Stallion. Yeah, I love being a heel. I was just on Twitter yesterday again for the first time talking smack to Jessica I. So
good.
Why not?
I'm not a fan. So
She missed by 5. No, I just like I like it too. I think the more people, I didn't deliberately go out to be the heel, but it turned out that way, and so hey,
it just fits some people, and I think it fits you well. So I feel like you should run with it. So we'll be rooting for you.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Awesome.